I don't know what I'm gonna title this video. At a certain point, blank is bad just kind of loses its ring. And I don't wanna adopt the I did this so you don't have to. I mean, I kind of did. I would not recommend playing this game. I don't know. Watch a playthrough. I feel like that'll be sufficient. I played Crisis Core Reunion, Final Fantasy VII. Is that the full name of this game? Oh, it's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. I'm so sorry to everyone that I've hurt by not knowing the name. So, Crisis Core Reunion is the prequel to Final Fantasy VII, and it follows Zack Fair up until his death. I feel like that's not a spoiler. I feel like if you're watching this video, it's because you already have a familiarity with Final Fantasy VII. I would not recommend playing this game without any knowledge of Final Fantasy VII. And if you know anything about the base game, you know that Zack is dead. Where we start off the game with Zack, he's a second-class soldier. Soldier's an organization within the world. There's a lot of military organizations. We'll get to it. So Zack is a second-class soldier. His goal is to become first class, which is the top that you can be. So the game details his exploits towards the end of his life, but it's really the setup for Final Fantasy VII. It's Sephiroth's villain origin story, Cloud's origin story. An even more reductive take is that this game is just about how Cloud gets the Buster Sword and his entire personality. I'm not going to spoil what's going on with Cloud. You can choose to do that yourself if you happen to not know. But also, the game is 26 years old. FF7 Remake is my entry into Final Fantasy in general as a franchise, but especially the FF7 extended universe. I do have to commend Crisis Core. I think it's a really great remake, whatever the industry is calling them these days. It's really good. For a game that was originally released on PSP, I think they did a really good job of making it appropriate for this decade, at least. Obviously, there are remnants of the era within the game. Like, the gameplay is really repetitive. I do appreciate that they revamped the fighting mechanics in this game. It really added a lot, especially because that's what you're going to spend so much of your time doing. It's repetitive, but it's fun to play. I'm going to get into the plot in detail in a moment, but just overall, Crisis Core feels like a stage play, and not a modern one, but like 19th century and older. Like, the pacing is weird. The storytelling is really disjointed. There's a lot of talking, but nothing is being said. And a lot of things just like happen off camera. Crisis Core has a big show don't tell issue. And this is further exacerbated by, I don't remember what it's called. The DMW, I think it's the digital mind wave. There's like a slot machine mechanic that's always happening during battles in this corner of the screen from your perspective, top left. That feels right. And it'll show different character portraits and numbers. And basically it just gives you combat boosts. The DMW is also what gives you access to limit breaks, which is basically just a special ability that's like vaguely linked to an associated character. But sometimes when you get those limit breaks of a certain rank, it shows you a cutscene that does not exist within the game's main narrative. So it's like just showing you a little vignette in the middle of fighting. And they're only like, 15 seconds long. They're not very long. But I found that there were multiple times in the middle of the game where I was like, did that happen? And then some of them played and I was like, absolutely not. I would have remembered that. But yeah, initially I was confused because I was like, that feels important. Like, I shouldn't have missed that. So there's some extra development that happens, but it's locked behind this feature. I feel like you probably can't see all of them in a single playthrough. I feel like that supports the kind of disjointed storytelling. I think this game has a big character writing issue. I have a whole plot synopsis. We'll get into it. The prologue. Nothing happens. Zack is in a training simulation. He's being groomed to become first class, but like not confirmed yet. Just a teaser trailer has been dropped. Like, we know it's going to happen. If we were all working there, we would all be like, yeah, Zack's going to get the promotion. But, it's one of those things, like, no one's allowed to say it, but like we can all feel it. The function of this chapter is to introduce Angeal, who I thought was Zack's dad at the opening of the game. It doesn't help that everyone wears the same outfit, but like they look similar. It's not established who they are to each other right off the bat, but it's clear that they have a mentor-student kind of dynamic, which I feel like translates really easily to like a parent-child relationship. What matters the most in the prologue is that there's been a huge desertion at Soldier. So a lot of their forces have left. Genesis is the deserter of note because he's also first-class soldier. You get little emails throughout the whole game. That's so funny. Little emails, little promotional newsletters. You get emails from Shinra, I think, whatever. Shinra is the big electric company in this world, and electricity and magic are like the same thing. Imagine if oil was magic. because it like powers the whole city, but you could shape oil into a little ball, and that little ball lets you shoot fire. The magic in this world is called mako. Shinra basically capitalismed so hard that they own the world. Not entirely, but they're really close. They're also really shady, so I think they send an email newsletter notice out. Every time someone deserts or they don't know where somebody is, they send an email to everybody saying that this person was killed in action. That brings us to chapter 1. We go to the country of Wutai. I don't know if it's a country, but the land, the jurisdiction. So Zack and Angeal are sent on this mission. Wutai is at war with Midgar. Is Midgar a country? Is it a city-state? The entity of Midgar is at war with the entity of Wutai. They send Zack and Angeal. The war is won. They're assigned this mission by Director Lazard. If it wasn't for a stupid plot thing that happens way later, I would not have mentioned this character at all because he really doesn't matter. Angeal has the Buster Sword, important sword. It's a family heirloom. These monsters begin to show up, and they all have Genesis's face, which is new for the world. So everyone's a bit surprised by that because they're like, didn't he desert? Why is there 8 of him here? He can clone himself. We'll get into it. Angeal deserts Soldier as well. And then Sephiroth shows up to help. Sephiroth is the #1 soldier hero of the planet. Angeal, Genesis, and Sephiroth also are all friends. Chapter 2, we head to Benora Village, which is where Genesis and Angeal grew up. And we're sent here because they think if Angeal's deserting, he's going to go to where his parents are. So we go with Sung from the Turks. If Soldier is like the military, maybe Soldier is more like special ops. It's hard to find a real world comparison. Shinra has Soldier, which is an army of super soldiers who are enhanced with Mako energy, and they're not looked at fondly in the culture of Midgar. The Turks are like the FBI because they have a lot of private government information, and then Shinra also just has like a private military force. And then there's also like peacekeepers. So they go to Benora, they explore around. Zack walks into Angeal's home. It looks like he's killed his mom, and Genesis is here as well. And he reveals at this point that Loveless is his entire personality. Loveless is an epic poem that has been adapted into a very famous stage play in this world. And then there's also a street named after it, and I think a building. Do I understand what happens in this poem? You're going to have to refer to another video, unfortunately.
Do you know the verse in Act 4 that leads into the final act?
Of course not.
But Genesis is into Loveless, and I can tell you that much. He really, really likes it. He actually won't stop talking about it. He actually only talks in Loveless. He barely speaks real lines of dialogue. But it's okay. This game is easy to follow, and I had a great time. Part of this game's odd pacing is that, like, time doesn't feel real, and neither does space. Like, all the characters will be where they need to be when we need them, conveniently, which is fine. I understand that you want a plot to move and we want things to be of significance, but I do think it's like kind of a lot when every other chapter is happening in a different location. I'm just like, wow, we're getting around like really fast. And it's really amazing, convenient for us that characters are situated where we need to be. Anywho, Angeal and Genesis, we couldn't find them anywhere initially, but surprise, surprise, both of them are here. We find them. Genesis like shoots out this big black wing out of his arm. And then there's like a lot of discussion as to whether or not soldiers are monsters. And Genesis's edgy monster arc is also supported by the fact that he can essentially duplicate himself because he can insert his cells into other beings and take control of them, more or less. So that's why we were fighting these clones in this last chapter. Anywho, Shinra destroys the town. So chapter 3, we're back in Midgar. Zack has been promoted to first class because he really slayed in Benora. Surprise, surprise, Genesis clones are attacking the city. Zack saves Cisne, who is another member of the Turks. They have a little chat, a little meet and greet. You can tell a friendship has started to blossom, perhaps an attraction. Zack heads to the reactor in Sector 5 with Sephiroth because that's where Angeal and Genesis are speculated to be. They now see that Angeal has associated monsters because like Genesis has the clones look exactly like Genesis. The sign that these are Angeal monsters is that they're kind of gray, and on all of them somewhere they have like a statue of Angeal's face embedded into their bodies. Okay, it's time for a lore dump. I'm just going to read what I wrote. Bear with me. So, we're at this reactor. Fighting happens. A flashback to a training simulation with the bestie trio. That's Genesis, Angeal, and Sephiroth. Genesis is only talking about Loveless because that's what she loves to do. Genesis compares their bestie trio to a trio that exists in the book. The fictional squared trio are searching for a gift from the goddess, and one person of the book trio is a hero. One of them is a wanderer, and one of them is a prisoner. And Genesis, deep down, he wants to be the hero. But like I said earlier, Sephiroth has been number one on the Billboard charts for his whole life. 27 years? How many weeks is that? Genesis basically doesn't stand a chance, but he's like, I'll duel you because they're men. So they fight. They're fighting in the little training simi, which is like also kind of a cop-out because it looks like they're going to have like a really big dramatic fight in a beautiful location. And then it ends up not being real. But what is real is the severe shoulder injury that Sephiroth gives Genesis. Things are not looking good for Genesis, and his shoulder wound is not healing. So he needs a blood transfusion, which Angeal gives to him. But Sephiroth also offers to give up his blood, but Hollander, who's like a shady little doctor, says Sephiroth can't do it. There's a reason why only Angeal could be the person who gave the blood. Jenova, I don't want to talk about this. It just feels kind of silly, especially because I know this content doesn't really matter once you hit 7. Jenova is a being from another planet that can turn living creatures into monsters by implanting her cells in them like a disease. That's my understanding. If I'm wrong, be mad at me. Thank you for the engagement. Jenova landed on Gaia, Earth, at some point, and scientists found her and took her with intention of replicating her powers by bestowing them onto a soldier, because there's an ancient race that existed on this planet called the Ancients, who are really connected with the life stream magic. They're really in tune with the magic of the world. So they think Jenova is that. Jenova is like an alien and is decidedly not that. But their objective is to artificially recreate the power of the Ancients by using Jenova. Shinra is already creating super soldiers, we know this, but they want to create like a super soldier who can amass an army easily, because if you can just shoot your intentions into somebody else, and also they adopt a lot of your power, that's really great for them in terms of military force. So Genesis has this cloning ability, not because he can actually clone himself, but because he can implant his cells into other beings and then they transform to his will basically. Angeal can also do it. Genesis has this power to make clones, but the big issue is the clones cause him to deteriorate. Angeal experiences degradation, but it's much more dubious as to why. Some things that I've looked at say that he's supposed to degrade. He degrades in the game, but other things lead me to believe that he's not supposed to degrade, because his mom didn't. His mom lived forever. And I guess Angeal's own body didn't degrade, but the clones did. Angeal's mom was injected with Jenova cells to be able to do this genetic takeover thing. So she was able to hold the cells in her body without dying. Angeal, being her child, inherited this ability. They injected the cells from the mom into Genesis while Genesis was being born, or when he was a baby, something like that. But that's why Genesis's abilities are the worst. Anyways, back to the plot. Genesis has come because he wants to snatch up Hollander, his blood transfusion guy, because Hollander says that he can cure the degradation. Angeal arrives. He has a white wing. Why there's a difference in the wing color, don't ask questions. Angeal calls himself a monster because of his super enhanced abilities, and he chucks Zack out of the reactor. We move on to chapter 4, the slums. Zack wakes up in a church in Sector 5. He's awoken by Aerith. He's lying in a bed of flowers that she's tending to that are growing inside of a church. Very beautiful, iconic locale. They meet. I guess it's love at first sight. They go on a date. Zack buys her a pink bow. And then Aerith talks about how she's scared of soldiers because they're humans, but they're kind of like monsters. They're really leaning into what makes you a monster and honor. Those are the big themes, but it's really trite. So who cares? Aerith is fearful because they've been experimented on and they love killing and they're extremely powerful and their eyes glow. And then Zack just looks at her deeply and he's like, am I scary? Reveals in the moment that he's a soldier, but she's into him. So she doesn't care, right? Throws away the whole political belief. Very Purple Hearts. That feels rude. It's not as bad as Purple Hearts. They're on this meet cute date. Never talked before, mind you. From what we're seeing, they're not really learning about each other. But Genesis attacks the Shinra building. What's confusing about that is that the building is in the middle of a circular city. So it's no one saw him on his way in. It's an army of monsters. No one caught that. Sure, Jan. They have to cut the date short because Zack has to go protect people. Genesis is after Professor Hojo, who's another nasty, nasty, evil little doctor. Hojo is responsible for Sephiroth. Hollander was like the competing doctor. Hollander was responsible for Angeal and Genesis. Hojo's the better doctor of the two. So Hojo is like, Hollander can't heal you, Genesis. Babes, it's not going to work out for you like that. They debate the last line of Loveless, the last act, the last chapter, whatever. Genesis thinks the gift of the goddess that the trio is after, he thinks that'll heal him. And Hojo's like, that's literally a story. I don't know about that. Chapter 5, we're headed to a place called Modeoheim for reasons I don't remember and don't really matter. We go on this mission with Sung, and we're on a helicopter, and Genesis clones shoot the helicopter out of the sky. Cloud is revealed as a character here. He's an infantryman who is just like part of the normal peacekeeping corps for Shinra. He's not a soldier. If you know, you know. This really matters. Cloud's a part of this mission. He and Zack have like a cute rapport because they're both small town boys. I think Hollander might be in the mountains around here. Maybe he's in Modeoheim. Genesis is after him and he's trying to kill Hollander because he can't heal him. Zack fights Genesis. Zack wins. Everyone thinks Genesis is dead, but we still have a whole half of a game left. So obviously not the case. Then Zack fights Angeal. Angeal is like, no, I'm a monster. And Zack is like, don't say that. You're not. Those are the themes. Monster or honor. Are you a bad guy or a good guy? Like, that's really what it boils down to, which is like also kind of crazy because it's very obvious that Shinra sucks. They're capitalist and evil. Hello. But Zack's an idiot and barely a character. So he doesn't care. He's doing what he wants. He feels like he's a good guy because he's strong and, you know, pro-cop messaging, right? Like, Angeal's like, have a critical thought. And Zack is like, honor, I'll kill you. Like, it's just not happening. Anywho, because you can't have an interesting discussion about theme without there being a fight, they fight. Think if Angeal was just like, what this company is doing is really, really wrong. Maybe Zack would change his mind, but intelligible conversations, few and far between in Crisis Core. Like, instead of being like, soldier did a bad thing to me, look what I can do, and then absorbing a bunch of monsters and be like, this feels like my humanity is compromised because I can do this with my body, therefore I am not like you. There's a lot of interesting discussion there. There's an interesting analysis here for me as a viewer about like maybe the characters in your narrative can engage with those topics and those themes. But talking is so hard. I guess Zack kills Angeal, basically his father, and it's really sad, especially because they could have just like talked it out. It could have been more impactful if this game had stronger writing, but you know, what are we paying the professionals to do, right? It's also worth noting that we're about halfway through the game and this is the first like real human boss that we've had. This is something that kind of bothered me throughout the game. It really pads out the experience because like, why am I fighting Ifrit? Why am I fighting Bahamut? Like, why am I fighting random robots at the end of a chapter just to pad out the runtime? I'm going to say that this is the first fight that like really matters. This is also how Zack gets the Buster Sword. Chapter 6, there's a bit of a time skip. Zack's mourning Angeal. He's on forced vacation from Shinra because they're like, we want you to take a bit of time to recuperate. This feels like it's a lot. He's still dating Aerith, but he's on vacation with Cisne. They have chemistry. For the scraps of writing that we get, I think they have a better written relationship than most of the characters in this game because they're just normal people who talk to each other. So it just feels like they have the most authentic connection. Genesis clones jump out of the ocean and then they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't solve the problem that easily. That's so crazy. And then there's a big attack on Junon, which is a place in the world, another action set piece where things happen. So we go there. Genesis is still after Hollander. I don't think he's trying to kill him anymore. I think now he's flipped back to thinking Hollander can help him. Lizard, the director from chapter 1, apparently gives Genesis information and betrays Soldier, which I didn't notice at all when playing. I don't remember this happening. It's not in a cutscene. By that I mean we don't see the character of Lizard commit the betrayal. All I remember seeing is in the following chapter after this is done, like another Shinra newsletter email in the inbox that's just like, Lizard, he doesn't work for us anymore. They give this character a certain amount of reverence, so it's just like kind of surprising that a plot important thing happens off camera. Anyways, I don't remember this happening. Genesis gets Hollander. We fight another robot. Chapter 7, we're back in the slums. Robots are attacking the slums. Zack and a dog Angeal copy, I'll throw up a picture probably. They save Aerith. The dog is just like hanging around the church to protect her probably. Their last date is Zack building Aerith a flower cart so that she can be a boss babe and sell her flowers. Again, this would be cute if they had a well-established relationship that grew over the course of this game. The Turks also promised to keep an eye on Aerith. They already are doing that. because she is the last ancient. So I don't know if she knows. I don't remember if that's part of her character, is knowing the circumstance of her birth. But they know she's a very important person, and they need to protect her at all costs. Sephiroth takes over Soldier. The plan is to go to Nibelheim because Genesis is targeting Mako reactors. So Sephiroth is just like, he's probably going to go there next. Shit's about to get crazy because plot is actually going to happen. Moving on to Chapter 8. Sephiroth, Zack, and Cloud, along with a lot of other, basically an army, they go to Cloud's hometown of Nibelheim. We see Tifa here. She's the guide during their stay. She has a very minimal role in this game, but that's okay. Why is she wearing a cowboy costume? Cloud is concealing his identity because he promised that he would become a soldier, and he has not achieved that yet. And I'm pretty sure he's writing home saying that he has, which is a lie. Because Tifa keeps on like subtly asking if they brought like a blonde guy with them, blonde soldier, and they're like, no. And then she's like, forget that I asked, don't worry about it. They're childhood friends, but they managed to not reveal themselves to each other during their stay in Nibelheim. So they go to the reactor where Jenova is, like Jenova's alien body. Genesis tells Sephiroth the circumstances of his birth because Sephiroth to this point doesn't know anything. He just is like, yeah, my mom's named Jenova, but he doesn't know her. He doesn't know what that means.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Sephiroth is really strong because of the Jenova cells. Again, the intention was that they were trying to make ancients who had really strong access to the world's magic. Jenova is an alien entity who is not that. It's relevant that he thinks he's an ancient. Genesis is like, Sephiroth, can I have some of your genetics, please? Because he thinks it might stop the degradation. And Sephiroth is like, no. They go to Shinra Manor, which is like a spooky old house with a lab underneath. The basement has reports detailing Sephiroth's origins. Because the conception is that Jenova is an ancient, Sephiroth thinks he's an ancient, and they're a group of people who basically died out and the humans turned their back on them. And Sephiroth, we get like a really gorgeous time-lapse scene of Sephiroth in this basement, and he's just like reading. And it feels like he's had a lot of time down there by himself to sit and stew in this really life-altering information. He snaps. It drives him a little bit crazy. So he's like, I am going to get revenge on the human race. He has a need for speed and a will to kill. And his immediate response is to burn down Nibelheim, kill everyone. He challenges Zack to like a fight in the reactor. So Zack goes, he fights, he's defeated. Tifa is on the ground. She's already done for. Cloud at some point gets there. Sephiroth, really long sword, stabs Cloud like right through the middle of the chest, and then Cloud has like a mother lifting the car to save her baby moment where he like picks up the sword that's lodged in his body, and Sephiroth is still holding on to it. It's stupid, but sometimes stupid is okay if it looks cool enough, because when this happens you're like, whoa, this is crazy. Cloud lifts him up and then he like chucks him down, and I guess there's just like an open vein of life stream magic air water running down there, so Sephiroth just like chucks him, and then the Jenova body is pushed into there as well, so they're both lost. So obviously Cloud is not live laugh loving with the hole going through his body. Zack and Cloud's bodies are retrieved by Hojo / his research team, and they're experimenting on them kind of to replace Sephiroth. They're injecting Sephiroth cells and Jenova cells, I think, into them, partially to test Hojo's reunion theory. I don't remember this being in the game, but this is what the wiki says. All the beings that have Jenova cells in them are like naturally attracted towards her, and that she maybe has like a recall function that will bring everything in her genetic jurisdiction to her, which is beneficial, because if she does that, or if that's like a naturally occurring phenomenon, then obviously that's a way for them to rediscover where her body is and continue experimenting whatever it is they want to do. So Zack is awoken in a pod by Angeal. Now you might be thinking, wait, isn't Angeal dead? And you're so right. I thought this was a ghost, that like Zack woke up and he like wasn't sure what was happening, and he's been asleep for 4 years. One can understand that he's maybe not totally with it, sees a figment of someone that he cares about, wakes up, punches through the glass. I thought this was a figment, and I think some people interpret this as imaginary, but we'll get to it. Zack wakes up, he breaks out, he takes out Cloud. Zack, because he's already been experimented on, he kind of has a little bit of resistance to procedures like these, so Zack's pretty okay. Cloud, however, the kids are not all right. He's in a catatonic state. Zack changes him into a first-class uniform to get him out of like the Mako-soaked clothes, because that's not good for him. If you know, you know. So they leave the Shinra mansion. They see that Nibelheim is completely rebuilt, as if nothing even happened. Zack is also still on the mailing list, so he does get an email confirming that he is dead. I can't believe I didn't bring this up. The flip phone of it all. I love so much that they use flip phones in this game. I don't know why. I think it's such a fabulous aesthetic choice. Like, I know this came out in like 2007, so flip phones were still very of the time. What was your first phone? Comment down below. I never had a flip phone. I had one of those flat Nokia ones, and then I had one that slid up. Just the flip noise open and then like the clack close. Delicious. Anywho, Zach is still on the mailing list. He does get a text saying that he was killed in action. The boy's a liar. Shinra / the military, maybe, they know. They know that Zach and Cloud are out, and the scientists are not happy. So they storm Nibelheim. Zach kills a bunch of people and then continues this little comedic farce of him dragging around Cloud's body and like talking to it. It's kind of camp. Chapter 9, they're still on the run. They run into Cisne, and she's obviously ordered to kill them like everybody else is. She doesn't. She does have mercy. I do think they should have fought. Cisne is a trained fighter. It would have been maybe nice to see her depicted as a little bit strong. Also, like, that would have been an emotional fight. They've developed a friendship over the game. They went to Hawaii together. You know what I mean? I didn't see Zach and Aerith take a trip. I'm just saying. Zach's a cheater. The boy's a liar. Cisne gives him a motorcycle. They go, they drive, but they're on a bridge somewhere industrial. Genesis stops them and he's like, you guys have the Cephi cells. Can I eat a little bit of your hair? And Zach is like, what? And then a clone rips out some of his hair and eats it. Not a cure, doesn't work, just makes him a stronger monster. Zach goes to his hometown of Gongaga. It gives me so much joy. It's so silly. I think the best line of this whole game is him going, it's Gongaga.
Cloud, this is my hometown. This is Gongaga.
Like I said earlier, Zach and Cloud bonded over being small village boys. Zach is from Gongaga. I can't do it. I can't get through. That's the last time I have to say it. Zach goes there. He thinks his parents are going to be there. Cisne shows up. By the time Zach gets there, the entire town is already boarded off. And then she's like, you're an idiot for coming here. Everyone in the world is after you. You didn't have the wherewithal to think that anyone smart would know that this is where you're going to be. Literally, this happened in chapter 2. Were you not paying attention? The whole point of that was to find Angeal. Cisne said, for once. Critical think for once. And Zach was like, Gongaga, no. Cisne's like, you need to go somewhere else. And then Zach keeps maybe seeing someone that kind of looks like Angeal, but like with gray hair. Zach chases after that. Genesis and Hollander show up. They're still alive. They're both degrading, though. They both have gray hair. Things are becoming worse. Hollander has become a Genesis clone. Zach kills Hollander, and then like Angeal is there to watch over Cloud's body, but it's not Angeal. It's Lazard. And Lazard is now an Angeal clone and also looks like Angeal. And now we're on to chapter 10, the final chapter. Zach is still after Genesis. He goes to Benora because he assumes that's where Genesis is, his childhood hometown. A theme, a trend. When you're a baddie on the run, what do? You return home to your roots. When you don't want to get caught, what do? Go to the one place where people are going to fucking find you. Zach goes, and unlike Nibelheim, which was like completely rebuilt, Benora destroyed, carpet bombed, unrecognizable. There's a lot of like Mako energy that's like illuminating the area. Very pretty. So there's like a really long final dungeon. It actually turns out it's not really that long, but I thought you had to go through, there's like a cave area and then there's like an underground dungeon cell holding area. I thought you had to do the whole prison complex situation to beat the game because you have to collect 7 goddess materia. You don't have to do that. That entire section is skippable, and I would have saved a lot of time, especially because I didn't know how to beat, I think it's called Behemoth. Behemoth Fury is the boss. I really struggled. If you're someone who's playing this game for the first time and you've made it this far into the review, barrier, magic barrier, and wall, they're very, very helpful, especially with enemies in the later game who can literally one-shot you. I go through this whole dungeon. I fought that boss so many times. I did level grinding to be able to fight that boss. But I think that entire section is optional. Honestly, though, I struggled a lot with that section, but it did make the last little bit of the game very easy. I was like, oh, this is a breeze. Pop the ether, shoot out a bunch of magic, you're golden. So you go around, you collect these materia, you put them on a little dais, elevator opens or something. You go into it. Genesis is there. He's like revering the statue. They fight. Zach wins. Genesis literally has a meet and greet with God, and she is like, it's not your time.
Candy, wait. Stop. not ready for you to go. Not yet. You are safe to slay another day.
So Zach drags Genesis's fainted body somewhere. Cloud's fainted body is also there. Angeal Lizard is there. The dog with Angeal's face on it is there. Lizard and the dog both die as a symbolic Angeal death, which is so crazy because we literally saw the actual Angeal death. That was a plot point that didn't need to be. Zach leaves with just Cloud, and then Genesis's body is unattended, and these two people come and get him because obviously it wouldn't be a Square Enix game if there wasn't a backdoor setup at a random point, because God forbid they leave well enough alone. Zach learns Aerith has been writing to him the whole time, and he's like trying to get back to her because he misses her obviously, and there's all these like letters that he hasn't received. And then a bunch of gunmen get to him, and then there's this big standoff, very famous scene for Final Fantasy, of Zach fighting off this entire militia. Basically, they're not going to retrieve his body, they're going to kill him. So Zach fights, it's bloody, it's like a massacre, honestly. There's a cut in it that skips forward a little bit into the future, and like all the rocks are red and it's like raining. So Zach did great, but he does die in the end. Before he dies, Cloud has woken up because the plot demands it. Cloud comes across Zach's body, he hears Zach's last words, and then he's bequeathed the Buster Sword. Credits roll, and then there's a post-credits scene, which is just the beginning of Final Fantasy VII. Aerith is looking up at the sky. She's on Loveless Avenue, and she's selling flowers. Not in the cart that Zach made her. She has a little basket. And Cloud is atop of a train saying that he's a first-class soldier, which mimics the opening scene of this game, where Zach is also on a train. And that's it. That's Crisis Core Reunion. My final thoughts. I think Zach is a bad character. Characters can be dumb, but I just feel like they have to want something. And I think if they're going to just like blindly chase, there needs to be a reason for that. But I'm not seeing a person who's like unwilling to look at their circumstances because of like a trauma or a reason. Like it's just, he doesn't want to because he's silly and like really good-hearted and well-intentioned. If he was a better character, I would have been more on board. I also was expecting a different characterization, especially because of the way Cloud's character is handled. If you know, you know. But I thought since like Cloud is brooding and edgy, that Zach would be brooding and edgy. This has been said a lot since the game came out. I don't want to beat a dead horse and be rude to a person. The vocal performance is bad, but I do think it was intentional because not all of his line delivery sucks, but a lot of it is stilted. And I think you can tell that the actor has a comedic background and doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience in voice work, at least according to his IMDb. It just doesn't feel like this character is reacting to anything. You can tell that the actor's pretty green and that the voice direction didn't really help him at all to like get there, especially because the vocal performance isn't all bad. So it just feels like it was a choice to like really reflect that this character is bright and stupid and not present with his surroundings. Do Angeal and Genesis matter? I would perhaps argue no. I think you have to write in a new big bad because it can't be Sephiroth. But I do think most of this game functions without them. Also, not sure that Zach really matters that much. Zach feels like a vehicle for Sephiroth and Cloud's stories to happen, the way that a French fry is a vehicle for ketchup. I talked about it more than once. I don't think Zach and Aerith necessarily have chemistry. I think a big flaw in that is just the fact that they're not written enough together. They only have 2 segments in the game where they're together. I just feel like maybe if we were checking back in with her all the time, that would be more effective. There are phones in this universe. It's obvious, phones, not for everybody. If Aerith had a phone, I think this might have fixed that. I don't think Zach and Cissnei are necessarily romantic. Like, I am totally comfortable with the perception of these 2 characters that is platonic, but I think just because they interact more throughout the game and Cissnei is present for more of the plot important moments, their relationship just feels a lot more authentic. When Zach saves Cissnei, when Cissnei shows mercy on Zach, when Cissnei gives Zach advice to help him survive, like, these just feel a lot more authentic and they're so much more tangible than Zach and Aerith went for a walk. They didn't talk about each other. It feels like a middle school relationship where like two children have just like spoken out loud that they're dating. You guys have just said that you like each other, but I don't believe it. And then you want to do like a whole soldier away from home. I need my letters. I'm thinking about you all the time and you're what's getting me through all the fighting. It's not supported by the text. It just isn't. And you cannot convince me otherwise. The implication that Sung is attracted to Aerith is like more realistic to me, because then he's like, no, I'm just doing my job. And then Zach is like, I don't know about that. Like, I believed that more than Zach being like, here's a bow. I don't know you. Lazard becoming Angeal achieves a Kingdom Hearts level of nonsense. And I love Kingdom Hearts. I don't think it worked here. It's supported by the text, but for some reason it just really pissed me off. Overall, I think Crisis Core Reunion is at its best when it's about Cloud and Sephiroth. The Nibelheim portion is the most exciting part of the game because the plot is largely relegated to be happening there. I like Angeal. Again, I don't think he's necessary. And Genesis is literally exhausting. I hate listening to him talk.
Legends shall speak of sacrifice at world's end. The wind sails over the water's surface, quietly but surely.
I think it's really hard to establish a parallel with an in-universe fictional text that the audience doesn't really know. And if you're going to do it, it either has to be so obvious or like extremely simple. This Loveless stuff, it doesn't make any sense, especially because there's not enough of dialogue that's just saying, this is what happens in this poem. It's basically Genesis just like doing a self-tape audition to be in the show because he already knows all the lines, which isn't interesting because he's not really doing a critical exploration of this text. And he's not saying what happens. Like, I don't really know what happens in Loveless. There's 3 characters in it, and one of them becomes a hero and one of them dies and one of them is lost. Great. This story doesn't really work as a game. I think it would have been a good movie. Like, for a lot of games, I do think it's fucked up and stupid when they have all this like additional media that either expands or like you literally need for context in order to understand what's going on in the game. But I think in this one, you do a simple little movie, call it Sephiroth's Origins, and it's about Zack. I think that sounds better, especially because you can trim all the fat and you don't have to do all this extra nonsense to make things work out. I think the pacing would be better. You can better establish the romance between Zack and Aerith because you have time to do that and you're not focused on these fights that don't really matter. I think the sci-fi components could be better paced, so we're not learning about this like genetic thing like 8 hours ago and it's only one line. Like, we can have a scene that's about it and maybe a scene that makes sense talking about it, just so that we all know what's going on. Not a lot happens in this game. Like, at the end of the day, it's a 10 to 15 hour experience and there's not a lot of plot. If Oni Black Mage can give you a full recap of it in like 27 minutes, it shouldn't be this hard to follow. I'm going to cap it off here. Did you play Crisis Core? Did you like it? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you have different readings of the text? Do you like Zack as a character? Is Zack your be all end all? Are Zack and Aerith endgame for you? I was kind of rooting for them to get together in the remake. I hope Aerith lives. If she dies in the remake, that's going to be a hard day for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. And thank you everyone for really supporting my last 2 videos. It means a lot. They kind of blew up in a way that my videos don't normally on this channel. My throat is sore from talking. And that is it for me today. Good night.